Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. I've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. It is another football episode coming at you. Me, Zack Guggenheim. We are here to talk about some spring intel from spring football practices in the Big Ten right now. Not every team has started spring practice, but most have. So we're going to be talking about some things going on there, some things coaches have said, some things players are doing. Should be a good time. In addition to that, Maryland has hired a football coach as their defensive coordinator, as opposed to not hiring a football coach. I guess that would be a silly mistake. So disregard that I even said that.
Well, it could be better if they didn't have. Never mind. We'll save that for later.
That's a tease for Zack's thoughts about Maryland. And then and then we will do the inverse of what we did last episode, which is look at the SP Plus rankings for Big Ten defenses, and then each give our top 5 defenses for next year. Zack, should be a good episode. Are you excited? Have you thought about defense all day? What are your thoughts?
So again, this will be a little bit of a tease. I am starting to think that a potential Big Ten championship game slot will be on the line in a certain game based off the SP Plus rankings, but it's not one that you'd expect.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. All right. Well, Zack, let's see who's in the chat with us here. We have John says they'll soon be hiring a basketball coach too. I think he's talking about Maryland with all the smoke going on with Kevin Willard right now. Kevin Willard did he skipped out on a radio interview today, 2 days before his team plays in the Sweet 16. So it's kind of a weird look.
Yeah. Maybe more practice. Maybe.
I mean, when there's rumors swirling that you're leaving, like, I don't know if skipping out on the on it is the best decision, but that's just me. That's just me. So we got we got Brooks with us as Penn State has the best D. We'll see. We'll talk about it. We'll rank it. Philip here with the ILL. That's I and I there for you there, Philip. Said, Joe says, what's the Willard smoke? I talked about it on the last basketball episode. You can go over to the basketball channel there. Essentially, Kevin Willard, he's not happy with the resources that Maryland is giving him right now, and so he's thinking about going to Villanova. So Philip says Villanova is hiring Richard Pitino. I don't know where Willard goes. Well, if Willard doesn't go to Villanova, he probably stays. But I saw that dude on Twitter that said the thing about Richard Pitino to Villanova, and I think that's a fake account on Twitter. So I wish there would be some organization to real and fake accounts, but whatever. It's the world we live in.
Yeah. So. You can rest assured that we are not fake accounts.
No, we are very real.
Yes.
Perhaps too real.
Yes.
All right, let's start with the stuff. We got a lot to get to here, Zack, and we don't need another hour and a half episode. All of our episodes here recently have gone an hour and 21 minutes. They varied on seconds, but they've been like the past 3 episodes have gone an hour and 21 minutes. So
dang,
I don't know how we've done that, but it's
consistent
just that way.
Consistent.
Yeah, you cannot call us anything but consistent. That's for sure. Long-winded, that too, but
look at this, John. Well done.
John knows what he's talking about.
Yes.
We've trained you well, John. All right, there we go. I finally pinned it. That took way too long to do. All right, Zack, let's get into our spring intel. Ohio State, they had some interviews today with players and their coaches, and today they interviewed the defensive line, and the defensive line had a lot of really good things to say about new defensive coordinator Matt Patricia. If you remember, Matt Patricia was a hire that Ohio State fans weren't very happy about. Michigan fans were ridiculing them about. Many other fan bases were ridiculing them about. I came on here and said that I didn't think it was a bad hire. I didn't know if it was a good hire or not, but we would kind of see what happens. And Ohio State players are now coming out talking about how much they love Matt Patricia, how much more free they feel like they are on the defense, and they're playing fast. Things are more simple for them, and they're just kind of going through it. Now, I will say there's not really any scheme happening yet, so I think that probably contributes to it. You're in like day 4 of spring practice, so they're not exactly implementing some deep scheme there, but the players are speaking well of Matt Patricia. Matt Patricia, known for not exactly being the most likable guy in the world. I would say this is good news, but I'm also not going to feed into it too much. Zach, what say you?
Yeah, I mean, it is good news that it's not gone south already, right? Like that's good.
Good, yeah.
It's
Day
good,
4, things are not terrible.
right? But and even then, like it's good that like CJ Hicks, who's a former 5-star guy who people have been salivating to see in an edge rush role, like he's actually being moved there, which it seemed like that was something that maybe Knowles and Larry Johnson maybe agreed on, but he's praising he is praising the process right now, and I think that it's good signs, right? You've seen it where you have a hire come in and there's some frustration or there's at least some hesitancy. That's not what we're seeing, and so does it mean that Ohio State's going to have the best defense in the Big Ten? No. Does it mean that it's a good sign for a team that already has tons of momentum? Yes.
Yeah, I would agree. And there were, some mentions of last year versus this year. Again, this is one of those situations where it's like you're not exactly putting the most scheme in day 4 spring football. So I would hope that, last year compared to this year with how complex Jim Knowles' system is, you are playing quicker and faster and all that stuff. Joe asks, a free defense, what precisely does that mean? I believe the context of what CJ Hicks particularly was talking about it was, when you play in a very complicated defense, sometimes you play slower because you're too concerned about your role or maybe what you have to do. But when you play more in a more free defense, you feel like you're just kind of told, go do this thing, make it happen, which can be good. Your natural athleticism comes out, but it can also be bad because you can overrun guys. You might not know your assignment. You might not do your assignment as well. So, I mean, overall, I think a free defense is good, but it does have aspects of possibly being bad as well.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the comparisons of this year, last year? Are you with me where it's like it's practice day 4, like you're not going to be involved in that much? Or do you
Yeah.
think that Matt Patricia might just be doing a better job with installing this stuff with the guys? What do you think?
I think it's more the former. Although I will say, we've both been Ohio State fans for a while. One of the criticisms back in 2017, 2018, with Shiano and the Grinch that stole defense, they talked about how it was too complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you saw that a little bit with early on with Knowles. Now, I mean, they learned the defense, but remember, part of the reason why the defense was so good was look at all the seniors that were on that defense that had been in that defense for 3 years, right? I mean, you had Tuli Moloau, you had Sawyer, you had Ransom, Burke, a number of linebackers, Cody Simon. Like you had a lot of 3-year either starters or heavy rotational players that knew the system. I think for a younger defense, it's much better for them to have a more user-friendly defense. So does that mean that Patricia is better than Knowles? No. It might be a better fit for this year's version of defense, though.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. I think at the end of the day, it's kind of like what we've been saying. It's good that things are good the first few days, but at the end of the day, it's not. This isn't anything revolutionary. This isn't anything to get too caught up on. I think if Matt Patricia's going to do a good job, he's going to continue to probably be likable, but he's also going to have to continue to put scheme in there, and we'll see what they're saying after the Texas game. After the Texas game, if they're saying it's way too complicated or it's not complicated enough, then we know a little bit more in that situation. So, did you? John says, if I can make fun of the SEC for a second, did you guys see Quinn Ewers at his pro day throwing ducks? Yeah, Quinn Ewers. I saw some of the videos there. He had one of those like fading to the side. I don't get it, man. I don't get the whole like fading to the side. When is that an actual throw in football? No
Yeah.
pressure. You're fading to the side, backward, and you just throw the ball up and your receiver runs under it. Like, it's not like the most accurate throw in the world. The ball sticks up there for so long, anybody can make it look like they're running in stride to catch the ball. Did you see any of it, Zach?
I didn't see any, but I did. This is probably not where we want to go with this, but I'll just say this. I saw a evaluation by Chris Sims with the quarterbacks in this class, and I'm routinely stupefied by how a former quarterback can be that bad at evaluating quarterbacks. Because he had like Quinn Ewers in a tier. I think that he was in the third tier, but with a bunch of people. Will Howard was nowhere to be found. And I'm just like, dude, I get that Will Howard's not an NFL. He's not like going to be a superstar. He also had Jackson Dart on the same level as Shador. I don't know. I just feel
Jackson
like
Dart's been gaining a lot of momentum lately.
yeah. Well,
It's weird.
I also this is my other hot take. I don't think there's a first round quarterback in this class. I know that there will be first round quarterbacks, but I don't think any of them are good enough to be first round.
I think Cam Ward can be. I don't think he's first overall pick good, but I think he is probably first round worthy. But he's the only one.
Where would you, if you had to pick him, what's the highest you'd pick Cam Ward at?
Probably outside the top 10.
Yeah.
I just don't think he's a sure enough thing. Like he's kind of like Caleb Williams a little bit with how much he runs around and does stuff. I think he's a little bit better on schedule than Caleb Williams is from what I saw at now I didn't watch Miami as much as I watched Caleb Williams at USC, but that's just kind of the way it seems to me from what I've seen. So
yeah, I think that's fair. I just don't see elite. Honestly, I don't think there's a ton of elite players in this draft to begin with, but I feel like the quarterback class in particular is not good.
You just had to bring him up, didn't you, Philip? My Colts. That was the stupidest pick in the world. Who's the next Anthony Richardson? Philip says. I don't know. I mean, is there anybody out there doing backflips that everybody's getting enamored over? It's like, how many times do you backflip in a real game? Never. I can't stay in the Colts. Okay.
Yep. Sorry, I derailed us long enough.
That's okay. The Colts are my favorite team, but they are also simultaneously my least favorite team at the same time. So that's my fandom in the NFL. Okay. Defensive line for Michigan, Zach. The defensive line is receiving a lot of praise from the coaches and from the media out of Michigan. The Rayshaun Benny, who ended the year last year as the third defensive lineman or the third interior defensive lineman for Michigan, is being thought of as being a very good player. Obviously, he's actually going to wear the same number as Mason Graham from last year, 55. So it was his high school number. So this isn't like him trying to be Mason Graham, I don't think, but it's interesting. And then you're hearing rave reviews about Tre Williams and Damon Payne. Sharon Moore is on record saying that it was a seamless transition. Nothing went wrong at all, and it didn't take them any time to get into the situation. So, I mean, the article I read said that the defensive line could possibly have no drop off compared to last year. I think that is a lie. That defensive line was so good. This is my thing. When we say, oh, it's going to be just as good as last year, like, do you know how insulting that is to like the players in the line? It's the same thing when Ohio State fans say, oh, our defense is going to be just as good as last year. It's like, no, you were in year 3 of a defensive coordinator with a very complex scheme, and you had players who were starting for 4 years on that defense. I get it. There are other guys who are athletic and talented, but it's not going to be that. Just like Rayshaun Benny, who has never started a full season in his career, he's not going to be Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham. Kenneth Grant and Mason Grant are aliens. They are great. They are fantastic football players. Rayshaun Benny can be very good. He's not going to be them. Underachiever at Alabama, Damon Payne can improve. He's not going to be Mason Graham or Kenneth Grant. Tre Williams, who started at Clemson, but I mean, he was good. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like he was terrible or anything. He's not Kenneth Grant. He's not Mason Graham. They brought Derek Moore back. That's awesome. They brought, they have TJ Guy there. TJ Guy is not Josiah Stewart. Josiah Stewart was a fantastic edge rusher. He was one of the
Yeah.
best. He was arguably the second best edge rusher in the Big Ten behind Abdul Carter. Mateo Uliungalele was right there too. But like, I I think this is so ridiculous when we're in spring camp and we say, oh, they're going to be just as good as they were last year. No, they're not.
Yeah.
That's an insult to the guys who were just as good last year. Anyway,
Yeah.
go ahead, Zach.
Well, I will say this though, and I think it's hyperbolic, right? You can't replace Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, Josiah Stewart, and expect to be just as good. Like, unless if you have premier players filling in. And obviously, I think Pierce and Payne and others, they've underachieved a little bit, but they have the raw talent. Like, they have raw ability. But I agree with you in the sense that there has to be a drop off. But and this is, I think, the key. The fact that there is this hyperbole makes me think the drop off won't be as severe as maybe some people want it to be, aka Ohio State fans or Penn State fans or Oregon fans. And I think the proof is in the Alabama game, which the Alabama offensive line was not great. Jalen Milroe stunk against pressure. So, like, we have to acknowledge those things. And the defensive line freaking destroyed Alabama. Like, it was an utter, I mean, it was awful. I was like, I don't swear, but I was like, I feel like that's the only way to describe what Alabama was in that game offensively. It was so bad. And it's because the defensive line, without those high-level starters, just destroyed them up front. So I agree with you. I think you do a disservice to Stewart, Graham, and Grant by saying that they'll be just as good. But, it's a big but, they have shown that they are effective. And that we should be aware of that.
I am not by any means saying that Michigan can't have another great defensive line. Michigan can have another great defensive line.
Yeah.
But you had two interior defensive linemen that were both first round caliber. Like, I mean, you don't get that. You don't get. Ohio State had an amazing defensive line this past year. They might have one guy go in the first round, probably not even one, right? Like, that's just kind of the way it goes. You can have a great defensive line, but it's still. It's not going to be the same. It's not going to be no drop off. You're not going to have the experience. You're not going to have the talent. It's just the way it is. It's the same, like I said, it's the same thing with Ohio State fans talking about the defense. So I'm not picking on Michigan here. In fact, I'm saying Michigan's going to probably have another very good to great defensive line. It's just not going to be the same as it was last year, in my opinion. David Greenshield said, JR, I think Sawyer was playing as good as any Big Ten edge by the playoffs. I mean, I don't think anybody can argue against that. He was just as good as Abdul Carter, Mateo Uyunglele. Like, he was just as good as pretty much any edge in the country. We saw what James Pierce looked like against Ohio State. We saw what Colin Simmons looked like against Ohio State. In my opinion, Jack Sawyer outplayed both those guys in those games. Mateo Uyunglele in that one. Like, so he was one of the best edge rushers in all of the country in the playoffs. It's just that was only in the playoffs. It wasn't all season long. Like, like Michigan's defensive line, in particular, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant were great all season long. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, what were you going to say? Sorry.
I was just going to say, one other thought is that I would not be surprised if Michigan's defensive line actually puts up better stats, because I think their offense will be more balanced and they have a more complementary team. That defense got tired a lot last year.
Yeah.
And so that's not saying that their defense will be better than last year or as good as last year. But I think this defense might have some hidden edges that people don't realize. But I agree with you. My argument is not, I'm not fighting you on what you're saying. I just think,
and I agree with you. It's going to be a very good defensive line. I do not doubt that. I just think it's an insult to say last year's defensive line for Michigan was also only very good. And I say only very good a little facetiously, because only very good is still very good. Like, let's not doubt that. So anyway, All right, let's go to the next one. Lincoln Riley had some words on Jada Mayava with before spring practice. He said, "I think the big thing is eliminating those one or two big negative plays a game because if you could go eliminate those from his stats, then the guy played off the charts. But that's part of great quarterbacking is knowing when can I be aggressive, when not. How can I avoid those but not become conservative because we don't want him to play that way either. The media for USC is also calling Maava the clear starter. That's what they seem to believe, that there is not a competition here. In fact, they believe the competition is more for the backup role between Hassan Longstreet and forgetting the other guy's name, the guy from Cal Poly. I apologize. But anyway, those two guys seem to be duking out more for the backup role rather than duking out with Jada Mayava. Zach, this is exactly what I said about Jada Mayava last year. When people were telling me Jada Mayava was awful, I said he was not awful. He made good plays. Yep. He was just too aggressive at times. And he made, he turned the ball over. Watch the Notre Dame game. He drove them down the field multiple times to win that game and then turned the ball over. Like, that is what Jada Mayava was last year. Now, is that good? Yeah, that's good because he's shown the ability, but he also has to learn the balance, like Lincoln Riley is saying here, of being aggressive and being conservative. You're too aggressive, you turn the ball over all the time. You're too conservative, you don't show your natural ability and who you are, which I think Jada Mayava has that ability, and under Lincoln Riley, it could be very good. We're just going to have to see how it happens next year. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Mayava was bad. He was inconsistent, and he made mistakes when he couldn't make them.
He was thrown into a starting role probably too early.
Yeah, but I love that he is declaring him the starter and like sticking behind him. My hope is that he does not move too quickly off of him if he struggles, like he did with Miller Moss. Because I think just, similarly, I think we felt like Miller Moss is the guy, he's the guy, and all of a sudden, why aren't you sticking with your guy? And so that's the biggest takeaway for me is Mayava is the guy and he's putting all his chips in that basket. Sam Heward, by the way, is the
Heward, that's right.
Yes, Brock Heward's son, I believe. But that's the biggest thing for me is he's not entertaining right now, at least that Longstreet is in this competition, that it's Mayava's and it's only Mayava's. I hope that's how it stays.
Yeah, I do too. We'll see how it goes. I think that now that I think about it more and kind of reflect on the year more, I do think that one of the reasons Miller Moss was relegated down from being the starters, he just didn't have that, playmaker ability that most of Lincoln Riley's amazing quarterbacks have, right? Yep. He didn't have that innate trait to be able to scramble, go out of the pocket, be super aggressive, throw the ball downfield, make a play with your legs. Like, that wasn't Miller Moss. Mm-hmm. He was a very on schedule, get it done type of guy. So he had the talent to be the starter. I just don't think he fit in Lincoln Riley's system, and they moved on from him, which I still don't think you should move on from a guy when you've been starting him all season long and he's not necessarily been bad, but it is what it is. Jada Mayava showed that he does have talent. We'll see what he can do with it next year. All right. Next one, Deshaun Singleton from Nebraska. Matt Rule was in his press conference today. Matt Rule doesn't really talk about players because go figure, he doesn't want anybody getting any ideas of who is good on his roster. Says he doesn't want them to, scout his roster, I guess, based on him talking well about them, because he doesn't want people scouting his roster in the spring game either, which does make a little bit of sense to me. But at the same time, it's like, dude, you can mention some names in your press conference. He's never said that's why he doesn't mention names, but I watch press conferences and I'm like, why don't you mention players' names? Like, give us some. Like, James Franklin today was a completely open book. He was like, yeah, I like this guy, I like this guy, I like this guy. This guy could go for the job. This guy's really young and he's really good. And I'm like, thank you, James. Look at that.
It's like, I actually know what you're thinking. Great.
Yeah. Thank you. But essentially, when Matt Rule was kind of talked about the team and the players and stuff like that, he had this quote where he said, "We are going to determine who are the best players and how do we get them on the field the most." And so, obviously, I mean, this is football kind of 2.0. This isn't anything revolutionary, but it is leading people to believe that based off of his comments, a player he might be thinking of would be somebody like Deshaun Singleton, who started at safety for them last year. Had some good games, had some okay games. He never really, I don't think he was ever like terrible, but he showed some promise to be a leader this year on defense. If he is one of those leaders, he could be somebody that could be used in a variety of roles, whether it's in the box or in coverage more, whatever that might be, kind of coming down close to the line to be a nickel back or something like that as well. Zach, your thoughts here on Nebraska and what they're thinking, playing their players, and Deshaun Singleton?
I mean, I think if they have confidence in Singleton and being a playmaker, and they feel like there's freedom in the defense to free him up, I can't like I feel like it's somewhat similar then to what CJ Hicks is talking about with Matt Patricia. And we just talked about how a free defense, especially for maybe a younger defense, can be helpful. I know that Nebraska's bringing back some guys, but I don't know. It feels like a win. It's hard to know without seeing it, but I think if I always appreciate when coaches identify players who are talented and they play through them rather than try to force their scheme. I feel like, again, I'm using Ohio State as an example, but they didn't let the scheme dictate Caleb Downs. They were like, Caleb Downs, you're awesome. Just do stuff and we'll build around you. And that feels similar to what like Nebraska seems to think. Deshaun Singleton can play a lot of different areas and be very versatile for us. Let's actually build some things around him. I think that's smart.
Yeah, no, I totally smart. I think you should do it if you have the players to do it. That's just the thing, right? Does Nebraska have the players to do it? They did a really good job in the transfer portal. They have good players coming back from last year. It's just, do you have those guys to do that around? Obviously, they don't have a Caleb Downs. Caleb Downs is one of, if not the best safeties in the country, but you can certainly find some different areas for guys to cross train, do different things, and excel in not just one area, but multiple different areas. So we'll see. Last thing here, Zach, is James Franklin had started his press conference talking about the middle linebacker role. Kobe King is going to need to be replaced next year. Next year. Last year, they did play some 4-3. Tom Allen primarily plays the 4-2-5, so it's not really just that. But in this situation, it looks like they're going to go to Jim Knowles' 4-2-5 as more of their base defense he's talking about. And so trying to find that middle linebacker role is going to be a little bit more difficult, especially considering last year they played the 3 linebackers. They still played 2 linebackers at times. It's not like they never went to nickel, but it looks like they are going to be going to a situation where they have 2 linebackers. For a place like Linebacker U, this is a little interesting. I know Penn State fans and others will call them that, and they have good reason to. They've had many good linebackers from there. Seems like it could be a little bit of a, why are we taking less linebackers off the field? But in my opinion, in recent years, Penn State's been better at putting out DBs than linebackers here recently, so I don't necessarily dislike it. But we knew this was going to happen with Jim Knowles, right? Like this is the defense that Jim Knowles runs. Your thoughts on replacing Kobe King and the new scheme change?
Well, I think it makes sense too, because you think about who they're going to be facing in the Big Ten. Aside from Michigan, they want to ground and pound, Ohio State runs a lot of 3 wide. And they do a lot of 2 tight end sets too, but it's a lot of 3 wide. Oregon is a lot of 3 wide. Oregon. You're playing USC. You're playing a lot of teams, particularly at the top of the conference, that are more spread you out, and to be able to defend from sideline to sideline, you're going to be forced to be more in nickel type packages anyway. So they have the personnel to do this. They bring back 2 of their top linebackers in Tony Rojas and Dominic DeLuca. So it makes sense. It's just now, how do you make that more a part of your identity? They already run a lot of it, but how do you continue to establish your identity there?
And how do you set up the defense well enough that you're not going to lose from, maybe guys not understanding the defense as well? Because as Jim Knowles says, it takes 2 or 3 years for teams to really pick up his defense. I think Penn State's a little bit ahead of the curve since they've already been running the 4-2-5 in some scenarios more often than just nickel packages. But at the same time, this is a new scheme. This is a new base defense for them. It's going to be interesting to see how they pick it up, particularly Dominic DeLuca and Tony Rojas, because those are going to be the two most important guys, as James Franklin calls them, the quarterbacks of the defense, and how they're going to be able to do that.
Yeah. One thing that helps them, if you look at their, at least according to our lads, which I know is not always the most, it's not always the most
they do the best
accurate,
they can.
but they do the best they can. But they're starting 11, one sophomore, the rest juniors and seniors. And so you have a lot of returning experience on that.
It reminds me a lot of the Ohio State defense last year.
Yep.
So, all right, Zach, our next subject, the new defensive coordinator for Maryland, Ted Monachino, I believe. He has been hired as the new defensive coordinator for Maryland. If you would recall, the old defensive coordinator took the job. Where was it? A Group of 5 school. He took the job at because there was rumors that he was going to be fired, so that way the school could hire Mel Tucker. The school did not get Mel Tucker approved, so the coach left, and now they needed to hire a defensive coordinator. Zach, Ted Monachino has been around a lot of different places. Been a defensive analyst in college. He was a defensive line coach at North Carolina. I believe last year was his first year doing that there. He's been with the Ravens. He's been all over the NFL. He's been all over college. One of those guys that kind of like a Jed Fisher a little bit, actually. Just kind of pops around, goes to a bunch of different places. I like that they have somebody with experience. I'll say that. I like that they didn't just go get somebody, who's super young and maybe doesn't have the experience to be able to build a defense in this short period of time. But I do have questions about Ted. However, I know you have more questions than me, so I'll turn it over to you for that part.
Well, so before I do my characteristic, tear a new one for Maryland, I will say this. I think Ted Monachino as just a coach is good. Like, I think you said it really well. He has a ton of experience. I mean, he's been coaching since 1991. He's coached at the high school level. He's coached at the lower college, lower colleges like TCU.
First college job was TCU.
Yeah, which is what they were probably either Group of 5 or
they were, yeah.
Yeah, they were Group of 5 at that point. He was at JMU for a year. He's been at several conferences. He's been in the NFL. So in terms of his experience, I think it is a good hire in terms of being a seasoned veteran in coaching. Here is my problem. And I think part of the problem is a result because of how Maryland botched this whole thing in the first place. Which I think that's the biggest issue with this is a result of a botch. So it's like, who's the best person we can get?
If those rumors are true, I they're still just rumors. Nobody came out and said we wanted Mel Tucker, but
no,
yes,
but the botch even of they lost a defensive coordinator to a Group of 5. I don't care how they lost him. That's either they should have fired him and gotten someone new back in December or January, or they should have, found a way to keep him. But this whole half-seas, when we want you, I don't care how it happened. They lost somebody to a Group of 5 school. That's a stain. I don't care. Sorry, this is where I start to get animated. He has been a defensive coordinator once in the NFL. So, again, year of experience, great. Was bottom 10 in passing defense and bottom 10 in rushing defense. That's where I just kind of scratch my head. He's been a defensive line coach. He's been an analyst. The past 3 years, he's been the Atlanta Falcons linebackers coach. He's the defensive analyst for North Carolina and then a defensive line coach. And I'm looking at the Wikipedia page.
His longest time he was at someplace was with the Ravens for 5 years.
Yeah. I don't get the sense that, like, I think there have been times that he's been welcomed back. Atlanta Falcons, it doesn't say that he left on his own accord or that he was fired, but he did not return to Atlanta
Yeah.
in 2020 or in 2023. So he's at North Carolina. He was elevated to defensive line coach after the dismissal of Gene Chizik, or dismissal of Tim Cross. Sorry. And now he's Maryland's defensive coordinator, and it's like,
Let me give you a counter and see what you think about this. I'm not necessarily saying I believe this counter, but I will fight for the other side. Um, Brian Williams, so that was the coordinator. I looked him up there. Brian Williams had only really been a DC in high school before becoming a defensive analyst and then a linebacker coach for 3 years at UAB, and then he became the outside linebackers coach to defensive line coach to co-DC to defensive coordinator for the past 3 years. I mean, like I agree with you. The Colts situation was bad. I also think sometimes people just go to the Colts and the Colts are bad. Like, trust me, I'm a fan. I know they're bad. But as far as I'm concerned, like the experience might make him better in general than Brian Williams. I'm not saying it's the best hire in the world. I'm not saying that they're going to have massive success with him. It's still better than Brian Williams, though, don't you think?
maybe. So my issue with this hire, though, is the process. That's my biggest issue with
You don't like
this.
that they had to hire somebody because he left. You would have rather them hired somebody and then moved Brian Williams on his way out.
Yeah, well, not only that, but it's to get someone who's more short. And I get Maryland it's not the greatest job in the world, but you're in the Big Ten. You've got resources. Why are we getting someone who's had 1 year of defensive coaching experience? Why are we getting left at the altar by a group of five school? That's my big question.
Yeah, I mean, they got left. If the rumors are true, they got left because Mike Locksley, probably managed this, or somebody, whether it was Mike Locksley or somebody else, managed the situation incorrectly.
Yeah.
And word got leaked out to Brian Williams, and he figured it out, and he said, "Well, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
Like I got to be somewhere else, otherwise I'm getting fired next year."
So is Ted Monachino maybe a better possibility than Brian Williams? Maybe, and that net positive, I would say. But my bigger question is the whole operation just feels wrong. And that's like, yes, you got a guy who might end up being better out of sheer luck. But why, how could Maryland could be so much better? I think that's so everybody get, this is the big thing.
That is the crux of everything here. Maryland has enough talent around them. They could be better. I don't know if they have, I mean, based on the basketball situation right now, it seems like they are supporting the football program enough for them to be better. But
yeah, that's so people who think that we're Maryland haters, like this is my frustration is I'm not a Maryland hater. I want Maryland to be good. I want them to be up to their potential. And I think you do too. Yeah. And this hire to me screams, we don't want to get better.
It screams. I don't know who they could have hired to really be a great situation. So that's kind of the grace I give them there, where it's like, I don't know who they would have hired, but I agree with you. It's more the case of, I don't like the situation, like what you did to get into this situation more than this situation, you handled it incorrectly. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And yes, Zack is a Mike Locksley hater, but we did convert him from a PJ Fleck hater. So
it's true.
There is hope. There is hope he can be converted.
Yes. I want to like Locksley. I know this is like, people are like, no, you don't. If Locksley won 9 games this year, I'd be like, dude, coach of the year. Like if they won 7 games this year or 8 games this year, I'd be like, in the running for coach of the year. But the problem is, I feel like they've underachieved when they've had really good rosters, and when they haven't had good rosters, they get blown out by Northwestern.
Fair. And then they beat USC later that year.
Yeah, which then tells you they have talent.
But this was every year though. They would lose to somebody, and then they would get Ohio State to overtime. They would lose to somebody that they shouldn't have lost to, and then they would take Michigan down to the wire when Michigan goes 15-0 and wins a national championship. This is what the program is under Mike Locksley. It's not that Mike Locksley can't get his team to perform well and can't get good players. He obviously can. He's shown it in spurts. It's that the team doesn't remain consistent for the entire year, and guys are not developing at the pace. Historically, they're not developing at the pace in which they should to, adhere to their recruiting rankings, which I don't always fault teams for, because I do think recruiting rankings are off sometimes, and you can't always predict the draft, right? But when it happens time and time and time again, that does reveal something to me. So, Zach, we need to move on. Any final thoughts on Mike Locksley hiring Ted Monachino?
I think I've said it before, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. Sometimes you just are who you are. And that's what I feel like this situation has revealed. It's like sometimes, Mike Locksley, until he proves otherwise, he just is who he is. And this is further proof of that.
And we want him to be better. We want him to be better.
Yeah.
I will end it with this. I will end it on a positive note for Maryland fans. I don't want to just end it by talking, how terrible he is and everything. Terrell Suggs, former Ravens defensive lineman, did have this to say about the hire of Ted Monachino. He said, "Monumental, the keystone, if you ask me." Terrell Suggs says about Monachino's influence: "He revamped my career." Referring to Monachino, he said, "As a master educator and master motivator, and their relationship is built on trust and truth." Now, a lot of this is not actually full quotes. A lot of this is like I said, pieces and parts kind of that I'm going at here. This is probably the most full quote we get. "It's definitely a winning formula, and I love the guy," Suggs said when they reunited in 2010. "I would play for him with one arm. I'm just flattered that I'm his player again." Now, that was back in 2010. But, that's a good reference from a very good NFL player. So, there's hope.
Yep. Yeah. I think he's a good coach. I just don't. Yeah.
Maybe Mike Locksley hit one out of the park. We'll see. All right, everybody. We'll head a commercial break, and then we'll come back. We'll talk about defenses in the Big Ten. Please stick with us. Homefield is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel with a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design. Homefield brings you gear that is comfortable and stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Homefield digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create one-of-a-kind apparel. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we did SP Plus offensive rankings last Sunday, so now we are going to get to defensive rankings. And Zach, these were a little bit more unexpected. I felt like these were a little bit more interesting to talk about, so I'm glad we got them here on the Tuesday night episode. If you are listening on podcast, I will read them off for you really fast, and then we will get Zach's reaction and what he thinks SP Plus got right. Starting at number 1, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Iowa, Minnesota. At number 6, Nebraska, followed by Oregon, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana. At number 10. At number 11 is Washington, followed by Michigan State, Northwestern, Rutgers, UCLA, and then your bottom 3 are Maryland, USC, and Purdue. Zach, I have to say, Oregon at 7 surprised me. Indiana at 10 surprised me. I thought they'd be in the top half at the very least. They were not in the SP Plus rankings. The SP Plus rankings does take into account early rankings in the year, so I think that's probably where it got Indiana a little bit, but still, this is what they are. Zach, if it's predicting for next year, these are not the rankings at the end of the year last year. These are the ranking predictions for next year. What do you think SP Plus got right?
Oh, not much. No, I think Michigan and Penn State, I would flip them a little bit, but I think they will be the two top defenses in the league. And I think that is really good on them. I think they both have returning starters. Michigan got key transfers. There's turnover at Michigan, and both teams are losing first round picks on the defensive line, right? That's tough to replace, but a lot of the core of their defense is coming back. Michigan getting Rod Moore back. That's big at the back half.
Derek Moore, TJ Guy was a good reserve last year. Rayshaun Benny was a good reserve last year. Yep.
So there's a lot there that's good. Ohio State is, I wouldn't have them at 1 just because of all that they lose. I have them in my top 5, and part of that is just you have Caleb Downs, right?
Yep.
So I think they got that right. They clearly got Purdue right.
Good job.
Yeah. That's they clearly got Purdue right.
I don't think USC was 17th though. Okay, hold
on.
We're starting on right. Let's go with right, and then we'll get to okay, go ahead.
And I think I didn't have Nebraska in my top 5 either. I had them outside, but I was like, yeah, Nebraska, that 6 to 8 range. I was like, that makes sense.
Yeah. I think Ohio State will be in the top 5. I don't have them number 1. Again, I just don't think Ohio State is going to be as good as they were last year. I think you have too much change. I think you have a lot of really good athletes. I still think you probably have a similar caliber of player, but defensive coordinator change, not as much of experience. It's just going to be tough. It's hard to be the number 1 defense in a revamped, much, much better Big Ten than what it was 5 years ago when, not just that, but there's also the transfer portal NIL that's, pushing talent everywhere else in the country as well. I do think that Penn State will probably be better than Michigan next year. I just think there's too much experience on that Penn State team, and I think that Jim Knowles will get them going very well. I do have questions about what it looks like early on. What are they going to do? But I think Penn State doesn't have the worst schedule in the world, so it's not like they're going to – I don't even think – where did we have them ranked? We had them ranked barely in the middle, didn't we?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember where we had
schedule wise, but anyway, it's not like a brutal schedule. That's another piece with Ohio State. Ohio State has a brutal schedule for next year, so they're going to be facing some good offenses, and they're going to be facing some teams on the road, i.e. Washington, who has a good offense and could put up points against them if Ohio State is not disciplined and careful. Illinois, or not Illinois, I'm talking about wrong when I get to them. Nebraska, I think, could be top 5, close to top 5. I think it does hurt them that they don't have their defensive coordinator back. Minnesota, they lost their defensive coordinator. I have a lot of questions about them. They're not in my top 5. It's not that I don't think PJ Fleck can make it happen. I just don't know what the new defensive coordinator is going to do. Corey Heatherman was really good. He was a good hire, and I think PJ Fleck can make good hires again, but there's just too many certainties on defense this year in the Big Ten for me to put them in my top 5. I think that's fair, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Minnesota, they were 3rd in the conference in terms of defensive efficiency in the
very good pass defense
FPI. But here's the thing: they lose Cody Lindenberg at linebacker. They lose Jaw Joyner at edge. They lose Justin Wally. Those are 3 massive pieces, one on each level of the defense.
Very good safeties, though. Coy Parrish is back.
Yeah, Coy Parrish is back, which is huge. But you're losing a lot on defense. And I wouldn't say a lot of players necessarily, but a lot of key players in key spots at each level. And so that's not to say that I think they will completely drop off. But
they're not going to drop off. They're still going to be a good defense.
Yeah.
It's just the Big Ten is very competitive and very good.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Sorry, did I cut you off?
Well, I was going to say, I think top half defense. I don't know if I would say top 5.
Okay. All right. I think that's fair. Okay. All right. What did it get wrong? We'll get to comments here in just a minute, guys. I want to try to get through wrong and right before we do that. So, what
Yeah.
did it get wrong? I will start with one team, and then you can go from there. I
Yeah.
think Illinois is going to be better than ninth. I have Illinois in my top five. I think they bring back too much. I think there's too much, consistency with the coaching staff. Aaron Henry. I know SP Plus doesn't take into account Aaron Henry coming back for what, year 3 or 4 this year. I think it's year 3 because Walters was year 2 at Purdue. So I think that that's going to be huge for them. Tell me I believe in Illinois too much. That's fine, but I see this as being a very good defense next year. I think Brett Bielema is going to rely upon it, and I think the offense is going to be better at holding on to the ball, which is going to make it better for the defense as well. Brett Bielema plays that type of style. I don't agree with middle of the pack Illinois. I think they're going to be better than that.
Yep, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. Another team, and I know they lose a little bit on defense. I think Indiana's a top 5 defense. Everybody talks about their offense last year. Their defense was legit. And people seem to miss that the defense was better than their offense. They have Kamara coming back.
Kamara coming back is huge. Yeah.
Aiden Fisher coming back. D'Angelo Pond's coming back. They've got key guys coming in both in the transfer portal and freshmen. I think Byron Baldwin's getting a lot of buzz. I just think, and here's the thing. This was my tease at the beginning. I think a top 5 game in the Big Ten for a potential Big Ten championship spot happens early in the year, Illinois, Indiana. Because if you look at their schedules, Indiana has to go to Penn State. But aside from that, they really don't have a ton of big games, whereas Ohio State's got to play Michigan and Penn State. Penn State's got to play Oregon and Ohio State and Indiana. Michigan's got to play at Nebraska, as well as Ohio State. There is a pathway for both Illinois and Indiana to get to the Big Ten championship game for the winner of that game.
Yeah, so I agree. Indiana, if they're not top 5, they're going to be very close to top 5. I don't know. I just wonder how big of a loss CJ West is.
It's a big loss.
Because he really stopped. He did a really good job of stopping the run. And if you looked at Indiana's run defense, he was integral in getting guys like Mikel Kamara open to make some of those open field tackles at the line of scrimmage. Not completely open field. They're at the line of scrimmage, but still, you know what I'm saying? Open enough that, he had to get down in the stance and make it. I think they'll do a good job of coaching the next guy up, but at the same time, I also have some concerns. But as many as other teams, because like you said, D'Angelo Pons, Aiden Fisher, Mikel Kamara coming back, those are 3 stars for that defense that are going to be back.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's get to comments really fast, and then we'll do our top 5. John says Indiana at 10 feels too low, but I understand it. I agree. Yeah, it's too low. Why is Illinois so low? Wow, no respect. Caitlin says, oof, not a fan of Aaron Henry, year 3. Yeah, SP Plus doesn't take into account the coaches, unfortunately. It just looks at production and who you brought in from the portal and stuff like that. So I'm a fan of Aaron Henry, year 3. I guess it's year 3, not year 4. So yeah. John's addressing CJ West here. He says, losing CJ West is going to hurt IU's interior on paper. Well, that's good. Good point. On paper. We'll see. He says, I think Hosea Wheeler is going to be a very solid replacement for him, but CJ made everyone's life a lot easier. Right. This is the same situation we're getting at a little bit with Michigan here, right? CJ West, fantastic player. You can do your best to try to have somebody come in and replace him, and you might find somebody who's also very good. But at the end of the day, it's disrespectful to see, and I'm not saying John's not saying this. I'm saying if anybody is saying, it's disrespectful to CJ West to say, well, yeah, the next guy they find is just going to be just as good. CJ West was really, really good. Again, John's not saying that. I'm just saying if there is anybody saying that. Mike says, go Big Red, of course. Alibaba, friend of the show, Mike Alibaba. He said, saw the Gophers practice today. Minnesota will be deep and talented and has arguably the best safety room in the conference. Coy Parrish and Kerry Brown, Aiden Gooseby there. And then he goes on to say, I think the Gophers will be a top defense. Again, it's a perennial thing. And new defense coordinator Danny Collins has been with PJ 13 years. He will pick up the baton where Heatherman left off. Very good argument there.
That is a good argument.
The safety room is huge for me. PJ Fleck always seems to be able to get good safeties. His secondary, at the very least, is very good. We'll see what happens with Danny Collins, new defensive coordinator. Him being with PJ for a while is a good sign. Again, Corey Heatherman to me did a really good job. We'll see what happens. If they are not top 5, they're going to be very close to top 5. So they would still be considered one of the top defenses in the Big Ten, in my opinion. Any thoughts on that one, Zach?
Yeah, I appreciate Mike's thoughts there because I think what he's saying maybe eases my concern a little bit for Minnesota. And it makes me even think maybe they will be top 5. They were really good last year. I mean, way better than I think I expected, even when I pulled up they were 11th in the country in terms of defensive efficiency for the football power index. Words, Zach. Oh my gosh. 11th in the FPI.
Very good. Very good. Let's see. Oh, Joe's a fan. He says, let's go, Zach. Bryant Haynes is an exceptional defense corner. And he is. He definitely, I mean, there was a reason why Indiana had to pay him this offseason because other teams were trying to poach him. And yeah. Mike says Nebraska's new defense coordinator Butler has way more experience, and they got their special teams coach back, Mike Eckler. See them winning 8 or 9 games. We talked about Nebraska, the schedule, everything else. Nebraska should be a dark horse to be a playoff team. It's just I've believed in Nebraska before, and so I'm hesitant to say it. But I did put them as, I believe I had them number 3 on my teams that didn't make the playoffs last year in the Big Ten that could make it again this year. So, Mike, I'm right there with you. I believe they can do it. I just need to see it. But I think it can definitely happen. Your thoughts, Zach?
Yeah, I agree. I think we've heard every spring Nebraska's back. And we've been hearing that since 2016.
They'll eventually be back. It'll happen eventually.
Yeah.
Will this be?
We need to hear it. I believe it will be this year. But again,
I also said that last year, though.
I said, yeah, we both said it last year. I went on record and said my upset of the year last year was Nebraska would beat USC. I was wrong.
If only you picked
that
Maryland.
Happened.
If only you picked Maryland.
You just had to go there, didn't you?
I did.
It's like a low blow. I would never do that. Anyway.
John saying that Xavier is hiring Richie Pitino now. So Willard's drama lives on. That's excellent. I love Willard's drama. So if that's the case, I'll have to check and make sure it's a credible person because I think the last person that tweeted it wasn't credible. But John knows the stuff, so I'm sure John knows. Okay, top 5 defenses. You want to go first? You want me to go first?
I'll go first so you can rip it apart.
I'm not going to rip yours apart. I'm going to just say mine, and we'll see where we differ.
Okay.
And people can vote on who they like better.
Yep. So my honorable mentions, not in no particular order. Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, Oregon are like the 4 that I'm like, they're top half defenses. And I think could easily end up in the top 5 by the end of the year. My number 5 is Indiana. Number 4, I have Ohio State. Okay. 3, I have Illinois.
Okay.
2, Michigan, 1, Penn State.
Okay. All right. I was really concerned we were going to have the exact same top 5 there for a second. So really? I'm not actually going to name a 5th. I'm going to give you 4 different teams that I think will be the 5th. And so I'm going to skirt the 5th one, and then I'll give a top 4. Okay.
What?
Zach, I make the schedule.
You
I make the
told
schedule.
me
I'm allowed to do
top 5.
I make the schedule. I'm allowed to do this. I think the top five. I think number 5 will be some combination of either Minnesota, Nebraska, Oregon, or Indiana. I think one of those will be the 5th one. I think we have to see how some things play out. I'm probably most confident in Indiana there because of the players they return, but I also think Oregon deserves credit because they bring in good players every single year, like out of the transfer portal. Dylan Thieneman, they're going to have good defensive line again. So I think that they're probably going to be right up there at top 5 as well. And then, like I said, Minnesota, they're going to have a really good secondary, really good safety room. We'll see what Danny Collins can do. And then Nebraska, I like him. I really like Nebraska's defense for next year. I just need to see it. And then after that, I will follow up with, I won't be as fun as you. I will go Illinois 4, Ohio State 3, Michigan 2, Penn State 1.
Oh, we were very similar.
Yeah, I think we had Illinois and Ohio State.
Ohio State flipped. Yeah.
So yeah. Vote in the comment or vote in the chat. Who do you guys like better? Mine, where I skirted number 5, or Zack, where he was a real man and he gave you 5 and some honorable mentions.
I was gonna say, to be fair, I pretty much did the same thing that you did. I just actually picked a 5th and then put a bunch of honorable mentions.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, I like these guys too, but they're not in my top 5 yet.
Who's a dark horse? Who's a dark horse to have a top 5 defense? So we mentioned, Wisconsin could be, but they have such a difficult schedule. I don't think they're going to get near it.
Yeah. There was a team I was surprised, and I was looking at the efficiency rankings, and I was actually surprised. I'm surprised how low Rutgers is, but I'm even more surprised at how low they were in their efficiency ranking from last year. They were 100th in the country in defensive efficiency, and I did not realize that. So
injuries killed them, man.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that because I think that they'll be a dark horse, but I had thought about them, but I think that was more based on reputation than it is actual personnel. One, and this might be coming off of my conversation with John from Westlot Pirates. I do wonder about Northwestern.
I just think that schedule's too tough.
It is tough, but so this is a plug for tomorrow night. It's going to be up tomorrow night. My conversation with John. Do you know the average record for Northwestern after a losing season?
Oh, they win like 9 or 10 games after a losing season because they always went up and down.
8-4. Okay. For the past 20 years, every time they come off a losing season, it's been at least 8-4, except once when they went 1-11.
Okay. What is their best defense they've had then in the conference? Let me look that up.
Maybe 20. It might be 2020.
Okay. If I can go back to 2016 on CFB stats. So last year, if you look at yards per play, I just think that's the best way to gauge it. Northwestern was 14th. In 2023, Northwestern was 9th. This was out of 14 teams, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
2022, they were 11th. 2021, they were 14th. So last 2020, they were 2nd. You were correct. 2020. They were them and Iowa were the only 2 teams in the conference with a yards per play allowed less than 5. Wisconsin was 5.01. Northwestern was 7th in 2019. They were 7th in 2018 and 7th in 2017 and 8th in 2016. Well, they were really consistent before 2020.
Yeah. As 2020, they were 3rd in the country in defensive efficiency for FPI.
Wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, could happen. We'll see. Could happen. I think a dark horse, and I know this is going to sound silly, and I know everybody's going to make fun of me, and that's okay. That's why I call it a dark horse, though. USC.
Yeah. I think it's a good pick.
If Dan Lynn gets it right, to go from 17th or 17th, in the prediction to top 5 seems pretty crazy. Like, I don't know if SP Plus would rank them that high based off that, but I think D'Anton Lynn is a really good defensive coordinator. Sounds like they got some more beef on the defensive line. Sounds like some players are going to be better. So, but it also sounds like players are gonna be better other places, so we'll see. But if USC gets things figured out, they could be up there.
Yeah. Just, I think to add to that, USC was in the middle of the pack in defensive efficiency, according to FPI last year. Like
Okay.
I believe they were 10th. 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, they were 10th, 43rd in the country. They were very close to Wisconsin. So Wisconsin, and again, this is a different rating system. This is FPI, defensive efficiency, but they had Wisconsin and USC and Washington all kind of grouped close together.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. Washington had a really good pass defense last year.
Yeah.
So
at least at home they did.
Well, yeah. At home their defense was really good.
Yeah.
So
at
all
Kinnick
right.
Stadium, on the other hand.
That's true.
Eesh.
All right. Zach, anything? I guess I should keep that up when I ask this. Anything else defensive wise you want to mention before we're done and we get out of here?
We got another 16 minutes to go. It's only an hour and 5.
No.
Is
We
it?
break
No.
we break it today. We break it today.
Okay. Excellent. Great.
So nothing else?
I got nothing.
Okay. All right. That means that will be the end of the episode for us. We appreciate you sticking around. We appreciate everybody in the comments adding to your no, John, not 2 more hours, not happening. Adding to the conversation. If we will, I'll be back with Jeff on a Thursday night. Jeff is going to be talking recruiting and some of that stuff, so we'll be back then. And then you can also catch me on the basketball channel, talking basketball. Gonna put out an episode on Thursday morning previewing the Sweet 16 games for the Big Ten, and then I'll be on Friday night after the Big Ten games. Not gonna go on Thursday night because there's only one Big Ten game. I'll go on Friday night after those games for Big Ten basketball to talk about that. The Big Ten shows are going to probably be premieres of like type things in the morning because I'll probably record them before and then have them go from there. But yeah, that'll probably be the way it goes. Philip is asking me to update the wrestling rankings. Let me.
Oh yeah, how many ballots did we get?
We are just a few away from 20, so we just need a few more. So I'll post that here in the chat again, and if you are so inclined and you would like to help us in our fun little project of ranking seeding the Big Ten head coaches in their wrestling. Bert is the only 5-star. You can help us do that. Bert got a 1 vote for a 2-star, 2 votes for a 3-star, 1 vote for a 4-star, and the rest were 5 stars. Coaches that have gotten 5-star votes: Kirk Zanetti got 1, Kirk Ferentz got 0, Mike Loxley got 1. I assume that's not right. I say that. Sharon Moore got 1. Sharon Moore should not have the same amount of 5-star votes as Mike Loxley. That should not happen.
Yeah, that's not okay. It's not okay.
Jonathan Smith has no 5-star, no 4-star votes. He does not give off wrestling vibes, I would say. Not to me. PJ Fleck does not have any 5 stars, but he does have a few 4 stars. Matt Rule, he's with the Jonathan Smith there. No 5, no 4 stars. David Braun does have 2 4 stars, but no 5 stars. Ryan Day with 1 4-star. Dan Lanning with 3 5 stars. People believe in Dan Lanning.
Yeah.
None for James Franklin, 5-star or 4-star. None for Barry Odom, 5-star, 4-star. 4 4-stars for Greg Schiano, but no 5 stars. Deshaun Foster with 4 4-stars, but no 5 stars. Lincoln Riley is all 1-stars, except for 1 is a 2-star. So sorry, Lincoln Riley. Jed Fish, 0 5-stars, 0 4-stars, and then Luke Fickle with 3 5-stars. I feel like Luke Fickle should have more.
Yep.
Don't think people have been scouting. You know,
I'm kind of surprised that Ryan Day. Like, I'm not surprised that Ryan Day doesn't have a lot of like high star rankings, but I'm surprised that Dan Lanning has more. Now, like, as I think about it more, because I'm like, Dan Lanning, like, outsmarted Ryan Day the first time, and then Ryan Day was like, "I'm gonna kill you," and like there was a murder at the Rose Bowl.
I mean, but he didn't kill him by wrestling him. He
No, but
killed him by
like,
throwing it to Jeremiah Smith.
but, well, yeah, that's fair. But my point is, like, I feel like I don't know. Ryan Day takes things personally. And like I could see a world where in a wrestling match, especially if steel chairs are involved, where he's just like, "Oh, you beat me the first time? Let me go get my bazooka and just blow you up."
Let me kill you. Okay.
Yeah.
Not that.
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what he did in the Rose Bowl. It's like, "Oh, you want to use that 12 men on the field thing? Yeah, we're just not even going to worry about that anymore."
Yeah. I don't know. I still think I take Dan Lanning.
Yeah, me too.
We'll get Dylan and everybody else's thoughts on it, but those are my thoughts. Caitlin has already declared Brett's the winner. He's a strong favorite. He is a strong favorite.
Yes.
Need an SEC coach wrestling bracket as well. Look, if we lump them in with the Big Ten ones, you thought our Big Ten rankings were bad compared to the SEC head coach rankings. You know, just wait for none of them to get to the Sweet 16 and the.
Kirby Smart was going to wrestle, but he got arrested for too many speeding drivers.
Ooh, harsh there, Zach. We haven't talked about that. Should we talk about that stuff? I mean, we try to be Big Ten mostly, but I do feel like it could be Big Ten-esque. Like
our friend Eric from the OHIO podcast put out that I think they've had more arrests for speeding than something. It's like 24 and 20. I need to find it.
I think I saw it. It was like they had more arrests at speeding than they scored points against Ole Miss last year or something like that.
Yeah, let me see. Let me see if I can find it here. Oh yeah. Since January of 2023, Georgia has 24 wins and 25 arrests.
Oh.
That's not a good look.
No. Well, and you know, tell me what you think about this, because Juck keeps saying it over at Juck on Bucks, which, by the way, if you like Ohio State content and maybe a little bit of extra Big Ten content, Juck on Bucks over there, we like Juck. He does a good job. He said that he would actually put Ryan Day as his best coach in all of college football now because of some of this driving stuff and how the players don't respect Kirby Smart and don't hold the program in high esteem. And the coaching is not good because the players don't respect them based off how much they're doing some of this driving stuff. And he said, if you think that Kirby Smart is ahead of Ryan Day because of national championships, you need to do the same thing with Dabo Swinney. I think that's a little bit different because of how long ago Dabo Swinney, won those championships, but I can see where he's coming from. Do you agree or disagree? Do the driving incidents affect, or should they affect, Kirby Smart's head coach ranking?
Yeah, I think okay. So it depends on what you're valuing, right? If you're just saying, and I think if we're just talking pure like X's and O's head coach, like football culture, like I still think Kirby Smart is your number one coach, right? But we've said on this show, and I think OHO, Eric and I on the OHIO podcast have talked about this. I know you've talked about this with Eric too. If you want to talk about just human beings and like people who build a culture for football players who excel at life, and you combine the football, like I do think you have to put Ryan Day in the upper tier. And I don't know how you put Kirby Smart in the same tier as Ryan Day when you've got a problem that continues to not be addressed. Whereas Ryan Day, like he run, like at least from everything that we see, you never know what's going on, 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, right?
Right.
But in terms of everything that we can see, like Ryan Day has run a very clean program.
Yeah, no, he has. There've been a couple incidents, but I think those two incidents, the guys, they were just allegations, and I think they got off free. And there was one that I don't think that happened early on. Yeah, they were acquitted.
Yeah, they were acquitted.
I think there was another one early on, but I think that one was more attributed to somebody that was an Urban Meyer guy. But still, he happened on his team. So
the most controversial thing that Ryan Day has allowed on his program is a revival.
Yeah.
Like
Those
that's
are some of the biggest events.
right. Like which some people might be like that they're a menace to society, but like if their biggest issue is they love Jesus more than football. Like,
well, there were some Ohio State fans that didn't like it that the Ohio State players were praying with the Michigan players after the game.
yeah,
So.
well, yeah, and
but I always disagreed with that.
Yeah, I think that's and listen, people have a right, but here's like the issue:
they were just frustrated. They were just angry. They wanted their team to win.
Are you going to be mad at your coach because he allows that to happen? Or are you going to be mad at your coach and hold him accountable for 25 arrests?
Yeah, the 25 arrests is much.
Good, and I mean, it's not even like they could kill people.
But Zach, the PD is actually out for them, though. Did you hear that? They're
Good
out for them.
Good.
Yeah, because they found a car in somebody else's apartment, and they were like, "Well, can't pass that one up. Got to go over there because that's Georgia football." That's the insane thing to me when people are like, the PD of Georgia is out for him. It's like the dude drove into an apartment. Like that's not like they don't just like say, "Oh, well, we're gonna go get him because he's in an apartment." Like he's a Georgia player. It's like no,
they killed a dude.
He's in an apartment.
Like what?
It was a staffer. Yeah, unfortunately, she did pass away after the game.
Yeah.
In the drag racing incident. That was very, very sad, and we should not joke about that.
Well, that's the thing. Like people saying this, it's like, well, they're after him. Yeah, they should. Like that. Sorry, I'm getting fired up now. We are going to go 2 more hours. This is no, we won't. I'll just finish with this. If we're talking about building a culture that causes a danger to the public versus a culture that is building young men's character, like I'm going to go with the latter every time. And that's not to say that Kirby Smart hasn't done some good things. I'm not trying to just paint him as like this evil person on the side, but like that is a significant issue that has not been addressed.
Well, and if it is, Philip's agreeing with you here. If it is, then the question is how far does Kirby Smart drop? Because, Dabo Swinney does a really good job with his program, and they put out a lot of really good young men, and they rarely have troubles with, incidents and stuff like that as well. So,
yeah.
Is Dabo Swinney number 2 because of that? Yeah. I tend to not get as much into the character stuff just because I don't truly feel like I know any of these guys or anything's character. Yeah. I do feel like we saw a good amount to make us feel like we know Ohio State's a little better last year. I think Clemson's has done a good job, but I also know there's a lot of people that are just outright skeptical of Clemson, and I get that to a certain extent as well. Yeah. I don't necessarily agree with bashing people because of their faith, but I understand being a bit skeptical sometimes. Yep. So I try not to subscribe to that stuff, but you're right. It's hard to overlook more arrests in your program than you've had wins since a certain time period. Like that's hard. And it's not just like it was yesterday time period. Like It's been 2 years. So yeah, but
yep.
All right. Philip says finish talking bad about the SEC. I mean, we kind of just did, right?
Yep.
We took their coach that they think is the best in the country and just said, nope, terrible person. I think we didn't call him that, but
no, but we want accountability. That's the biggest. There needs to be accountability.
It's really, really difficult to try and measure character, but in this situation, I see where Jack is coming from because it is such a big thing on both sides. Ohio State has players that are literally donating their NIL, and other places have done this too, but are donating their NIL to like feed people, and they're not going out on the weekends and they're going out on the weekends and going to church. Like it's not. Yeah, that's not a problem.
Blake Corum did that for Michigan too. Like
exactly.
And you see a lot of these guys doing that. I think I don't want to just say it's the Big Ten, but like you don't hear like it might be happening at Georgia. You don't hear about that though because you hear about arrests.
Right. Yeah, very true. Very true. All right. Zach, should we stay on another 2 minutes because we're almost at 19? And then we
No,
get to 21?
end,
Okay.
end,
All right,
end.
we'll end it. Okay. All right, we'll end it. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Have a good one. We'll see you. Well, Jeff and I will see you on Thursday. Zach and I will see you on Sunday. Have a good one.